Hey, shalom, shalom, mishpocha. Welcome to another edition of Ray Bash's Ramblings. I'm your host, Rabbi Yehuda ben Shomer, and today I'm going to be talking about the plight of the Natsarim. We're living in a very extraordinary time in history where prophecy is being fulfilled at an alarming rate, and things are happening at such a fast, breakneck pace. A lot of these lost tribes are coming together and being found, and things of this nature. And one of the things that's being fulfilled is the restoration of the believing sect of Judaism called the Natsarim, that believe that Yeshua is the divine Messiah, but yet they don't do away with any of the culture, customs, traditions, or any part of the Torah in order to believe these things. They still identify with Judaism and with the Torah. And one thing that is an issue is that when the Natsarim broke off from mainstream Judaism was during the Bar Kokhba revolt, where Rabbi Akiva proclaimed General Bar Kokhba as the Mashiach, as Messiah, in order to rally the people and to try to shake themselves of the Roman oppression. And everybody was on board, and everybody worshipped side by side, believers, believing Jews and non-believing Jews up to that point. But when Rabbi Akiva proclaimed Bar Kokhba as Mashiach, the Natsarim said, "Sorry, we can't go along with this. You know, this isn't the Mashiach. This isn't our Mashiach." And so they were basically booted out of Judaism at that point, and were considered traitors because they wouldn't fight under this false Messiah, Bar Kokhba. Well, coincidentally, that Bar Kokhba revolt was just a washout. They were defeated. But then you have the the Gentile believers who have attached themselves to Natsari Judaism, where they started to break away when you had like Ignatius proclaim himself as bishop, and basically he started bringing back pagan elements that they were separated from back into the movement and started doing away with many things of Torah. And so the Gentiles started parting ways with the believing Jews. So you have this believing Jewish sect that stands alone all by itself, and they had to basically go underground. They were persecuted by the Gentile Christians as well as persecuted by the non-believing Jews. And a lot of their history and a lot of their documents partially have been preserved through Josephus and Philos and others, where you kind of get a smattering here and there of the sect of the way of Hadarek, or the sect of the Natsarim. But then there's a point in history where you really don't hear much about them anymore. And I believe that their documents and things of this nature were either confiscated or they were burned. I've heard stories of priests defecting from Catholicism and getting out of the priesthood because they saw things, books and writings and materials within the Vatican that testifies to the fact of this Natsarim movement. And I think that Catholicism has actually taken a lot of their documents and have basically stripped it of all Jewishness and put everything Gentile and Catholic within it to take away the Jewishness out of it. There's some documents where they've doctored and kind of adopted and taken as their own that originally came from the Natsarim. So now we're living in this era, in this time period, where the Natsarim are starting to come out of the woodwork, and we're starting to find out who we are. Many are discovering that they're Jews for the very first time by digging into their lineage and their family history, etc. And this movement is in its infancy, and it's just as if we have just rolled out of the crib and we're beginning to crawl, and we're doing our best to gain strength in our legs to pull ourselves up and begin walking. And we can't say, like the Rabbinical Dynasty, the Hasidic movement, the Jews today can trace their lineage all the way back to the Pharisees that we read about, the Perushim that we read about in the Brit Kadesha, the New Testament. They have an unbroken chain of a long line of Rabbinical Dynasty that goes all the way back to Moshe. We can't say that because due to the persecution and having to go underground, and a lot of our history and documents have been either burned or confiscated or what have you, we do not have that unbroken chain. So we're having to start new dynasties. We're having to rebuild and reestablish ourselves, even though that we trace our lineage, our heritage, basically back to Yeshua and his talmidim, and from them to Moshe. But it's not like there's an abundance of Natsarim yeshivas around. You have some floating around in cyberspace, and even some of those are very questionable, and the people who are running them are questionable. So most of the Natsarim rabbis that you will run into, very, very few of them have an Orthodox education or an Orthodox shmicah. And even if they do have an Orthodox shmicah, it's clear that the Orthodox don't know about them and their beliefs in Yeshua and their movement within the Natsarim, or their shmicah would be pulled, they would be revoked. So a lot of Natsarim rabbis that you will run in today are either frauds, they're totally fake, totally fraudulent, and they're just claiming the title of rabbi for themselves, or you have Natsarim rabbis who have a solid education through Christianity and through Christian seminary, and with a deep understanding and a deep appreciation for and working knowledge in the Hebraic roots of the faith. And many of these pastors or what have you have been grandfathered into the Natsarim movement and have gotten their rabbinical ordination with maybe some supplementary classes they had to take. Or you have some Messianics who've defected from MJA and all these other Messianic groups to become Natsarim, and their Messianic shmicahs have been grandfathered over. You do have some Natsarim rabbis like myself who have personally studied one-on-one under several rabbis. There are some Natsarim rabbis who have been shmicah'd through a Messianic or Natsari organization. So very few of them have gone to yeshiva. Very few of them have gone back to school, but that's not to say that their shmicahs are not valid. That's not to say that they're not legitimate, because we're just having to begin. We're just having to start all over again and having to rebuild ourselves. So you have to start somewhere. And so a lot of the rabbis that are in operation in Natsarim movements today are grandfathered in through Christian or Messianic education. And I think that's totally fine as long as they have a good working knowledge of the traditions of Judaism and what have you. And they're solid within their Natsari faith and their Natsari beliefs. This is until we can establish hardcore, solid, legitimate yeshivas. I'm sure that there's a few out there. They're few and far between. And there's some floating around in cyberspace that I've kind of checked into. I'm not sure how legitimate they are or how well academically rounded they are. I'm not sure. Some of them, like I say, have leadership that is questionable. And so legitimacy is one of the plights of the Natsarim movement right now and today. But you've got to start somewhere. It's got to begin somewhere. And I think it's necessary that we have to grandfather some of these folks in until we get a good solid group of people. Then we can work to achieve to actually build and set up legitimate, hardcore, academically, doctrinally sound yeshivas to where we could raise up a new generation of Natsari rabbis that have shmicahs from a Natsari organization that is solid, that is proven, tried and true, and that is that's been around and that's solid, to where within our own movement we can gain some clout and recognition and no longer have to rely on these grandfathered ordinations from Christian and Messianic education. That's great. I'm glad that there are Natsari rabbis that have that solid foundation of those educations from Christianity and Messianic Judaism. But when somebody comes over to the Natsari faith, there's a lot of deprogramming, a lot of re-education that you have to go through to kind of weed out all the paganistic and Gentile Christian overtones and philosophies and false doctrines within that, and kind of and that's a reprogramming process. It's a cleansing, purging process, but it has been achieved. It can be achieved. People are going through it. It's necessary. And then once they have a solid footing in Natsari Judaism and in Judaism itself, then they can go on to be solid leaders within the movement. And so I know that legitimacy is really a great concern for people, but also we have to take into consideration that it's one thing to have as my Southern parents and grandparents say, there's something to be said about book learning, but book learning can only take you so far. It's one thing to know things in your head, and it's another thing to know them in your head and in your heart and to be able to carry them out. There's such a thing as practical application and practical hands-on experience. And, yes, I've got, Christian education as well as Messianic and Natsari education, but I have way more practical, ministerial, hands-on knowledge than I do academic book learning. And I'm still learning. I'm still learning through literature and through books. I'm continually learning. I'm always learning. I'll never stop learning. The only time I'll stop is when I'm 6 feet under. But, I've been in ministry basically since 1986, if I can remember my years and my dates correctly. So I've been in ministry for a long time. Been there, done that, seen it, got the t-shirt kind of thing. So I think you have to have a good marriage between academia and hands-on knowledge, because you can't be a successful, well-rounded, level-headed rabbi without both. You have some of these yeshiva boys who come right out of school and they're so green and they don't have much practical experience. Well, you've got to be well-seasoned in the books and well-seasoned in the practical working application and knowledge, hands-on kind of thing as well. So that's where we're at, folks. That's where Natsari Judaism is right now. And it's not so necessarily important regarding who has whatever titles before their name or whatever letters they have behind their name. If they have those, that's great. That's wonderful. But you know what? More so than looking for credentials and papers and shmicahs and ordinations and titles before the name and letters after the name is to make sure that the person that you're studying under, the person that's ministering to you, have the fruits, whether they have those titles and letters or not, regardless if they have papers and ordinations and titles or not. If their fruit matches, if their fruit backs them up, you will know people by their fruit. And in this early infantile stage of Natsari Judaism that's just re-emerging and prophecies being fulfilled and we're just getting back onto our feet, the only way to have true legitimacy is to bear the right fruit. And if the people's got the fruit, then those extra academic accreditations and shmicahs and ordinations and everything will follow. We've got to lay a foundation first, and that's what we're at. We're clearing ground and we're laying a foundation. Once the foundation is laid and the fruits back us up, we'll be able to rise up and be able to build hardcore academic, doctrinally sound spiritual yeshivas for the next generation of Natsari rabbis that are coming up, and they won't have to go through what we're going through. We're the trailblazers. We're the pioneers. We're the one who's doing all the dirty work, and cutting the brush and getting things prepared. But that doesn't make us any less legitimate than those who have than our secular and Orthodox counterparts that have these shmicahs and education and what have you. And I know a lot of people are tempted. They're just so fed up with a lot of the con artists that have kind of gone into the movement and a lot of the unsteadiness and shakiness that comes with just starting out, and they're like, well, I just want to go to Orthodox Judaism, but I don't want to deny Messiah, and so they just feel like they're in a limbo. And really, that's kind of where we have to be right now until we can really work the ground and really get some good foundations laid to where we can build it up. But there's something to be said. There's something blessed to be at this groundbreaking level. So don't give up, folks. Don't give up. Don't get in. Don't get discouraged or disheartened. But just keep fighting, knowing that we're the pioneers. We're paving the way for the generation that's coming behind us. So it'll be much easier for them to get really established and really firm in Natsari Judaism. And we're just going to only get stronger from here. But there's just a lot of bugs and kinks and deprogramming that we have to go through and cleansing and things we have to work out. But let's stick together, pull together, hang in there, back each other up, and let our fruits be our credentials alongside whatever Christian and Messianic and whatever small portion of Natsari education and accreditation that we do have. So thanks for watching. Shalom and Shavua Tov.